1785. A man lies in a bed in England, drowning. Not in a river, in himself. His legs have swollen to twice their normal size. The skin stretched so tight it shines. Fluid is pooling in his belly, filling his lungs, rising toward his heart. Every doctor who has looked at him has said the same thing. There is nothing to be done. They called it dropsy. In the 1700s, it was a death sentence. The slow, suffocating kind of death that took paupers and kings alike, and money couldn't buy your way out of it. Then a country doctor does something that should have killed the man faster. He feeds him a poison picked from the side of a road, from a flower children were warned never to touch. And the man gets better. That same poison is sitting in more than 1 million American prescriptions right now. This is where it begins. Long before it had a name in any medical textbook, this flower was already famous for killing people. It grows wild across Europe. And if you've ever driven the back roads of Oregon or Washington in early summer, you've seen it gone feral in the ditches. Tall purple spires, 4, 5, sometimes 6 feet high, hung with rows of drooping, bell-shaped blossoms. Purple on the outside, speckled on the inside with dark spots ringed in white, like a throat full of tiny, watching eyes. In England and Ireland it bloomed in the hedgerows, in the cool shade at the edge of the woods, in the churned-up dirt wherever a tree had fallen. Beautiful, everywhere, and deadly. Every part of it is poison. The leaves, the flowers, the seeds, the roots, even the water left in a vase after you cut it. Children have died just from drinking that vase water. Livestock learn to step around it. The taste is bitter and hot, and the smell is faintly rotten, as if the plant is telling you the truth about itself. Country people didn't need a chemist to warn them. They named it themselves, and the names were warnings. Dead man's bells, witches' gloves, bloody fingers. They said the flowers were gloves worn by the fairy folk, that the plant's oldest name, foxglove, may really come from folk's glove, the glove of the fair folk. They said the white speckles in each flower's throat were fairy fingerprints, or a warning, depending on who you asked and how superstitious they were. Here's the part that puts it in perspective. People were living alongside this plant, naming it, fearing it, whispering stories about it, for centuries before the United States existed. When the Pilgrims stepped off the Mayflower at Plymouth, English villagers had already been telling their kids to stay away from dead man's bells for generations. This wasn't some rare bloom on a distant mountaintop. It carpeted an area larger than the entire American Northeast, hiding in plain sight in every damp corner of the British Isles. In 1542, a German botanist named Leonhard Fuchs finally pinned a formal name on it. He looked at those flowers, each one shaped exactly like the finger of a glove, like a thimble you could slide over a fingertip, and he called the plant Digitalis. From the Latin word for finger, he even scribbled down, almost as an afterthought, that it might help drain the swelling of dropsy. And then, for nearly 200 years, medicine did almost nothing with that idea. The cure for one of the deadliest conditions of the age was sitting in every hedgerow in Europe. Nobody was ready to touch it. In 1775, an English physician named William Withering was asked to look at a recipe. It was a folk remedy, a family secret, supposedly kept for years by an old woman in the county of Shropshire, who had a reputation for curing dropsy after the real doctors had thrown up their hands. The recipe was a witch's brew of some 20 different herbs. But Withering wasn't just a doctor, he was also a serious botanist. And when he read through that tangle of ingredients, one plant jumped out at him as the thing actually doing the work: foxglove. Now, you may have heard a romantic version of this story, starring a wise old healer named Mother Hutton, cheated out of her glory by an arrogant doctor. Let it go. That name and that whole tale were basically invented over a century later, cooked up in the 1920s by an American drug company for an advertising campaign. The real story is messier and, honestly, better. Withering heard about foxglove from folk medicine and from a fellow doctor who'd watched it work, and instead of dismissing peasant remedies the way most educated men of his time did, he decided to find out whether the old woman was right. What followed was, in a real sense, one of the first modern drug trials in history. For 10 years, Withering worked the razor's edge. He dried the leaves, ground them to powder, and gave carefully measured doses to patient after patient, 163 of them in the end. He learned that too little did nothing, and too much was a horror. Violent vomiting, a heartbeat that slowed and slowed and stopped. Somewhere in between those two disasters was a narrow window where the drug did something miraculous. It pulled the fluid out of a dying body and steadied a failing heart. In 1785, he published his findings in a slim book with a long title, an account of the foxglove and some of its medical uses. And it was revolutionary, not just for what it found, but for how honest it was. Withering wrote down every single case, the successes, the failures, the patients it didn't help, and the ones it poisoned. He wasn't selling a miracle, he was telling the truth. Before that book, dropsy simply killed you. After it, for the first time, there was a thread you could pull to drag someone back from the edge. And Withering did one more thing, something almost nobody who came after him in this story would ever do. He gave it away. He published the knowledge for anyone to read, for free, and told the world exactly how the plant worked and exactly how easily it could kill. He handed humanity a cure that was also a loaded gun. That decision seemed small at the time. It was not. Because the moment that flower left an old woman's garden and entered the machinery of medicine, it stopped belonging to the people who found it. Before we go further, if you're new here, this channel digs into the hidden histories behind the things that quietly run the world. Real stories, real numbers, no filler. New video every week. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Texas, New York, or somewhere in between. I always want to know. Now, let's follow that flower into the machine. Withering handed the world a plant. Over the next 150 years, science took that plant apart. Through the 1800s, chemists chased the active ingredient like it was buried treasure, because it basically was. In the 1840s, two French scientists pulled out a compound they called digitalin. In 1875, a German pharmacologist isolated a more potent one, digoxin. Each step took the messy, unpredictable leaf and squeezed it down toward a single pure chemical you could measure to the milligram. And measurement was everything. Because with this plant, the gap between healing and killing was almost too thin to see. By then, it had crossed the Atlantic. Foxglove was carried to America and planted here more than 200 years ago. And during the Civil War, Union surgeons were already reaching for Digitalis to treat soldiers with failing racing hearts. It earned a permanent entry in the official United States Pharmacopoeia, the government's master list of approved medicines. A fairy tale poison from an English hedgerow had become standard issue American medical supply. Eventually, scientists even figured out how it worked, and it's genuinely elegant. Your heart cells run tiny molecular pumps that shuttle sodium and potassium in and out. Digitalis jams those pumps. The knock-on effect is that the heart squeezes harder and beats slower and steadier. For a heart that's flailing, too weak, too fast, out of rhythm. That's the difference between drowning and breathing. The final piece landed in 1930, when a chemist named Sidney Smith, working in Britain, isolated the compound that would become the gold standard. He pulled it not from the common purple foxglove, but from a shaggier cousin called woolly foxglove, and he named it digoxin. That molecule, digoxin, is the one still coursing through those million-plus American prescriptions today. Here's a detail that says everything about this plant. Digoxin is so complicated to build from scratch that even now, it's cheaper and easier to grow it. To this day, much of the world's supply is farmed. Foxglove raised from seed for 2 full years, dried, crushed into powder, and chemically stripped of its treasure. 90 years of pharmaceutical progress, and we still can't beat the flower at making its own poison. But everything about this drug rested on one terrifying fact. The dose that saves a life and the dose that ends one are almost neighbors. And an entire industry was about to be built right on top of that knife's edge. every commodity story has a human cost. With most of them, the cost is paid by the people who grow it or mine it. With Digitalis, the cost was paid by the patients. Because this drug forgives nothing. Push the dose a hair too high, or give a normal dose to someone whose kidneys can't clear it fast enough, and the medicine turns on the body. The first sign is often the strangest one in all of medicine. The world goes yellow. It's called xanthopsia. Digitalis poisoning tints a person's vision gold, wraps bright halos around lights, smears the edges of everything in a hazy glow, and there's a haunting theory attached to that symptom. Vincent van Gogh, who painted the night sky as swirling yellow halos in the starry night, is thought by many researchers to have been treated with Digitalis for his epilepsy. We can't prove it changed his art. But we do know this. The only surviving portrait Van Gogh painted of his doctor shows the man leaning on a table, and resting on that table, deliberately placed, is a single stalk of purple foxglove. The plant that heals the heart and gilds the eyes, tucked right into the frame. Yellow vision was the warning. If you missed it, what came next was nausea, confusion, a heartbeat sliding into chaos, and death. For as long as doctors have used this plant, some patients have been poisoned by the exact thing sent to save them. Not through malice, just through the impossible narrowness of the line. Quick question, and I actually want your answer. How many Americans do you think still take a drug made from this exact flower every single year? Lock in a number. Drop it in the comments. I'll tell you before the end, and I promise the real figure is going to surprise you. Because here's what matters for you, sitting in the United States right now. This isn't a museum piece. This flower's poison went into American medicine cabinets, American hospitals, American ambulances, and stayed there. Which is exactly why what happened next hit so close to home. By the second half of the 20th century, digoxin wasn't a curiosity, it was a cornerstone. If you had congestive heart failure in America, odds are you were on it. Through the 1980s and into the 1990s, digoxin was one of the most prescribed heart drugs in the country. By some estimates, as many as 8 out of 10 appropriate heart failure patients were taking it. It was cheap. It was familiar. Doctors had trusted it for generations. American factories cranked out tablets by the ton. As far as most of the medical world was concerned, the wildflower had finally been fully tamed by science. The danger was solved. The story was over. It wasn't. In 1997, a massive federally funded study run by the National Institutes of Health, thousands of patients deep, asked a simple, brutal question about digoxin. Does it actually keep people alive longer? And the answer, after 2 centuries of faith, was no. Digoxin kept people out of the hospital. It made them feel better. But it didn't extend their lives the way newer drugs did. Almost overnight, its use collapsed for one common type of heart failure, from roughly 80% of patients down to under 30%. And now, for a fact that should stop you cold. This drug, used on human beings for 200 years, poured into millions of American bodies, was only formally approved by the FDA in the late 1990s. For most of its life, it had simply been grandfathered in. Nobody at the modern regulatory level had ever put it through the full approval ringer because it predated the rules. We'd been trusting it on tradition, on the word of a Birmingham doctor from 1785. So here's what I haven't told you yet. When you take a wildflower that any cottager could grow for free, strip it down to a single potent molecule, and hand it to a handful of pharmaceutical companies to manufacture and sell, you don't just get a medicine. You get everything that can go wrong when profit meets a poison. And by their own records, the people making America's heart pills already knew. April 2008. The FDA issues its most serious kind of alert, a Class Y recall, the category reserved for products that can kill you, on a heart drug called Digitek. Digitek was generic digoxin. Same molecule Withering pulled out of that old woman's remedy. It was made by a company called Activist Totowa at a plant in Little Falls, New Jersey. and sold across the country under labels distributed by the drug giant Mylan and others. At the time, Digitek made up roughly half of all the digoxin on the American market. If you were an American on this heart drug, there was a coin flip's chance the pills in your cabinet came from this one factory. And here was the defect. Some of the tablets had been pressed double thick, which meant they could contain up to double the dose. Remember what kind of drug this is. This is the drug where the line between medicine and poison is almost invisible. Doubling the dose isn't a quality hiccup. For a frail heart patient with weak kidneys, doubling the dose can be a death sentence. Now here's the part that should make you angry. The FDA had already flagged this plant. Federal inspectors had cited the facility for manufacturing violations in the years before the recall. In one inspection, investigators found a precision machine used to make medication had been patched up with duct tape. Duct tape on the equipment producing one of the least forgiving drugs in the entire pharmacy. This wasn't a foreign problem. This didn't happen in some far-off factory you'll never see. This happened in New Jersey, under the eyes of American regulators who had already seen the warning signs and let the line keep running. And the human toll is genuinely hard to look at. An investigation by the Center for Public Integrity found that in a single 3-month window around the recall, the FDA received reports attributing 667 deaths to Digitek. Now, I want to be straight with you, because this channel doesn't do cheap outrage. The agency argued that most of those reports rolled in after the recall made headlines, and it said proving each death was caused by the pills would be difficult. Fair enough, but strip all of that away, and you're still left with hundreds of American families who buried someone taking a heart pill that the maker's own factory couldn't be trusted to size correctly. Congress opened an inquiry, asking flat out whether the FDA had been deceived or had simply failed to inspect. The Justice Department moved in. The plants were forced shut. The wildflower had been tamed, all right. Tamed into a factory product that a machine held together with duct tape could quietly turn back into a poison. You'd think that would be the low point. It wasn't, because a few years later, the same little pill became the star of a very different American scandal, one that didn't need a defective machine at all, just a spreadsheet. For decades, generic digoxin was one of the cheapest drugs in the entire pharmacy. In 2012, a single tablet cost around 11 cents. 11 cents. For a medicine descended from a plant a Shropshire grandmother grew in her yard, whose knowledge William Withering deliberately gave to the world for free. Then, starting in late 2013, the price exploded. A Philadelphia generic drug maker called Lannett led the charge. And according to state investigators, the price of its digoxin rose by hundreds of percent. By one measure, more than 800% over 2 years. That 11-cent pill shot up toward $1 and beyond. And here's the tell. The moment Lannett raised its price, its competitors didn't undercut it to steal the market, the way competition is supposed to work. They matched it, within days, one after another. There was no shortage, no new ingredient, no reason on earth for a decades-old penny medicine to suddenly cost 10 times more, except that the companies making it appear to have stopped competing. State and federal authorities noticed. The Attorney General of Connecticut subpoenaed Lannett over its digoxin pricing and helped launch a sweeping antitrust case accusing a whole cluster of generic manufacturers of coordinating prices, treating digoxin as one of the flagship examples. The United States Senate held hearings, holding this exact drug up on the floor and demanding to know why a heart medicine that cost 11 cents was suddenly gouging the sick, and who paid. The people whose hearts depended on it. Overwhelmingly older Americans, many on fixed incomes, many on Medicare, the exact patients most likely to be in heart failure, most likely to be counting pennies, and least able to fight back. Withering published this cure for free in 1785. More than 2 centuries later, a handful of companies allegedly got together and decided that Americans should pay whatever the traffic would bear. They knew, and they kept charging, while the people who needed it most paid the price. So here's the answer to that question from earlier. How many Americans still take a drug made from this flower every year? Digoxin is still filled more than 1 million times a year in the United States. It sits on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines, the drugs the planet cannot do without. It's in hospital crash carts, it's in ambulances, it's in the plastic pill organizers on kitchen counters from Florida to Alaska, tucked between the blood pressure pills and the baby aspirin. And it matters more than ever because the disease it fights is spreading. Roughly 6.7 million American adults are living with heart failure today, and that number is climbing toward nearly 9 million by 2030. Heart disease is still the #1 killer in this country, 1 in every 4 deaths. The failing American heart is not a shrinking problem, it's a growing one. The flower itself is closer than you think too. Foxglove is a bestseller in American garden centers. Those tall purple spires are probably growing in a landscaping bed outside a Walmart or a CVS near you right now. Sold as a pretty ornamental, most shoppers never knowing they're walking past dead man's bells. And scientists aren't done with it. Researchers are now investigating the same cardiac compounds as possible weapons against cancer. 450 years after Fuchs named it, the fairy flower still hasn't given up all its secrets. It's in your neighbor's flower bed. It's in your grandmother's pill case. It might someday be in a cancer ward. Same plant, same poison, same impossibly thin line. Slow down with me for a second, because this is the part that stays with you. A weed that peasants feared as a witch's poison became one of the most important heart medicines in human history. A cure that an old woman guarded and a doctor gave away for free became a factory product that could be botched to lethal doses, and a penny pill that could be marked up 800% by companies who stopped competing. The whole arc of this flower is the whole arc of how this country turns a gift from the earth into a product on a shelf. We tell ourselves a story in America: free markets, fair competition, transparency, the best thing wins, and the little guy gets a fair shake. And then you follow one flower, from a hedgerow, through a laboratory, into a New Jersey factory, onto a price-fixing spreadsheet, and finally into your grandmother's hand. And you see how wide the gap can be between the story and the receipt. How many things in your life right now were shaped by a decision made in a boardroom you never got to vote in? A price you never got to argue? A corner someone cut in a factory you'll never see? Sit with that one. I'm not going to answer it for you. Here's what I'll ask instead. Have you, or someone you love, ever taken a heart medication and just trusted, without a second thought, that it was made right and priced fair? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If this is the kind of story you want more of, the real history behind the things that quietly run your life, subscribe. Hit the like button. It genuinely tells me to keep going deeper. And share this with someone who thinks they already know how the world works. Because somewhere tonight, an American grandmother is filling a plastic pill organizer, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, dropping in a tiny tablet grown from a fairy tale flower that country people once called dead man's bells. She doesn't know its name once meant the glove of the fairy folk. She doesn't know a doctor gave it to the world for free, or that a factory once packed it double strong, or that a room full of executives once made her pay 8 times more for it. She just knows it keeps her heart beating. That's the whole story of America in one little pill. A gift from the earth, run through a machine, and sold right back to you every single day.